Thanks for being here. It's great to talk about AI ethics with practitioners on the front line of this. You guys run AI systems and run marketplaces for training data to use to train AI systems. So it would be great to hear your perspectives as someone who deal with the systems and think about the ethical issues involved daily. But as a reporter in the room, I'm going to start with the news, which is what's happening in DC. I know, Daniela, you have actually worked with former President Biden on advising the executive order on promoting safer use of AI system, and we see that executive order got revoked in the first week of President Trump in the White House, and he promoted a new executive order, which is more about removing regulatory barriers of developing AI systems. So I'm curious, what are the conversations in DC these days you're hearing?
So, right now, President Trump is revoking every order that President Biden did before. But the reality is when you sit at the lobbying meetings and events, when you are talking with the House and the Senate at closed doors, and when you are amongst other colleagues of which are some of us, all the ecosystem companies that are part of our trade organization that we're part of, we really see at the high level we're going to soften the regulation, but still follow the state of California, Colorado, and Utah templates as a framework for all the other states. And these bills and laws that have been passing in California, so I'm going to talk a little bit about California because a lot of people are from here, from there. We know what's going on. Some of them is basically the mandate, which was in 2024 and is going to be effective in 2026. And this is at state level, so I don't think President Trump is going to revoke that because the continuity, if anything, President Trump is giving more authority to the states to run their own laws and bills. And one of them is to disclose the provenance of data for all Gen AI developers, which actually is very dear to our mission. And the second one is to disclose, every platform with over 1 million users has to state that when there are Gen AI or AI interactions with users. And of course, we can go to the other states, but these are said to be the templates for all the states. And really, we receive a monthly newsletter from our trade organization with pages and pages and pages, state by state, of bills around AI. So if anything, there's a perception that we're going to soften regulation, but at the state level, there's continuity, and that's not going to stop.
Rodrigo, as someone who built AI systems, both from the hardware and software layers, is there any regulations or policy changes that you are paying most attention to?
Well, I mean, look, some of them we build chips that compete with NVIDIA. We build models that help enterprises drive secure and private AI services using the private data. And so for us, that's really important. Obviously, on the chip side, we always watch the export control laws, of where we can move chips. It's about teraflops, it's about bandwidth, what can we ship. And from day one, we've always been very focused on making sure that we follow those rules as far as where the chips can go. AI diffusion laws that kind of recently were passed, those are all continuing to evolve, and so we watch those very carefully. But here, I'll say this. Trustworthy AI is going to be the new competitive edge, right? We've gone to the point where you've got a lot of people providing services, but can you provide something that people can trust, people can believe? And so, sum it over, we're very focused on making sure that transparency is at the key of that, right? And if we were 100% open source, because it allows you a level of transparency on how it was trained, what model was used, what are you doing to actually deliver those services, so that your users can then trust the outcome of it, right? And so I think over the coming year, you're going to see more and more interest in making sure that the services that we provide are explainable, are transparent, so that you can build that level of trust with the consumers that are using your services.
So you're seeing potentially more development and use cases for open source models.
Yeah, I think the world's hybrid. I think you're going to have those, the closed source models that provide certain services. But more and more, I do think that it's the Linux moment for AI that you see this year with DeepSeek, and you see the Llama models, these large models, the 405 billion parameter model from Llama, new models coming out. Now the 671 billion parameter model from DeepSeek, this R1 reasoning model. The next versions of model getting bigger and bigger. They're starting to compete with some of the largest closed source models, and they're really, really good. And here's the difference here. It's open. You can verify, you can certify, you can test it, you can monitor, you can make sure that you can regulate it in some places. And so those are important things that I think for certain types of use cases in certain regions is going to be incredibly important. And we want to make sure that we have a way for people to be able to deploy those types of models in those types of use cases and continue to be able to provide that level of transparency and that level of trustability, because like I said, it's going to be a competitive edge for businesses to be able to actually deliver trustworthy AI.
Daniela, do you see open source as a potential solution to some of the ethical issues we're seeing in AI development?
Well, at the moment, there's little to none scrutiny on provenance of data and what ingredients were used in the open source models. So if anything, I do see the closed source world much more worried about documenting and revealing to their customers who are asking these questions, because they're not going to build a model from scratch, but they need to trust the source of the data. They cannot, especially financial institutions which are highly regulated, as well as healthcare. How can they? They actually start with open source, and then they start looking at closed source, because there is a traceability, and they can rely on the offering in a more trustworthy way. So if anything, open source so far, it's great to scale up innovation and to start experiments and build a lot of experiments in-house, so you make a decision, an informed decision, whether you should build your own foundational model or not, because it is a big endeavor. But I do think that the legislation of transparency and copyright clearance and all of the above has not yet been clear for open source, unless it's provided by a big company that cares about their brand reputation and therefore cares about not being sued.
So you're saying in your travel, running one of the major marketplaces for training data, you're actually seeing closed source model companies generally more concerned about the source and clarity of their data?
And needing to license data. And going after licensed data, closed source data, that they can prove to their customers that their models are copyright clear and that you can trace the provenance of the data.
Rodrigo, as the open source advocate on our panel, what do you have anything to say to that?
Oh, well, I think, like I said, I think that trustworthiness is a competitive advantage, and I think I think Daniela's right. I think a lot of the closed source vendors are already there, and we're not just a purely open source. We just think that open source is going to be a big player in the community, just because people want to own their destiny, right? And so we travel across the world. We're the #1 deployer of sovereign AI. By that I mean, we go into places where you can own the model, and the way to own the model in perpetuity is to be able to start with an open source model that you can actually own, right? And so that's why we promote it, not because we only think that that's the only thing. That it's really, we're meeting the market where people want to be able to take their data, their private data they've accumulated for decades. They want to use it, they want to leverage it, but they don't feel comfortable releasing that out into somebody else's model, right? And so we think that that's going to be an important aspect of how people build their AI services, using open source, take that private data, train into it, and own it in perpetuity, right? And so I do think that the closed source companies are ahead of it. They're starting to really understand what does it mean to build trustworthy models, and the data sources are really, really important. I do think that open source organizations are always going to catch up to it too, right? Because they are going to be under the same scrutiny, and under people say, well, should I use this model versus that model? Well, let me see how they trained it, right? And so you're going to see over time that catch up of these open source models, because it is going to be my belief is going to be a hybrid world, that you're going to need both of those. In some cases, you can use an open AI type of model. In some cases, you want to take a llama-based model and then fine-tune your data and own in perpetuity, right? So that you can actually control your own destiny. And I think that in highly regulated environments, governments, banks, healthcare, various types of regulated environments, there is benefit in being able to control that data and where it goes, especially as you fine-tune that data into the models. And so starting with a place where you can actually take open source, make sure that you know where the models are going, how you're training, how you're fine-tuning it, how you're deploying it, and having that level of control is really, really, really important for those businesses.
I want to double click on the data pieces, because as we all know, this is one of the key ingredients that made the models good and powerful as we see today. And in the conversations I have with investors and startup founders in Silicon Valley, sometimes there is a mentality of, do it until you get caught. Like if it's not banned, I mean, maybe it's okay to do it. And there is a gray area in terms of what you can use as training data or in terms of scraping. And Daniela, I know you have a lot of conversations with companies and their lawyer teams on that. Have you seen any mentality shift, or how conversations on that data scraping and use for training change at all?
I think that comes with maturity. In the beginning, I mean, we all been there as startup founders, early stage. We have to get it done, no matter what. Ideally, legally. I always did it legally, but some people, I'm going to say this again. I always did it legally in case it was not coming through properly. Some people don't have the same value system. And yes, investors do say, and I hear that, just go until you get caught. However, I'm going to now use a different argument besides. But when you get to maturity, like you can see the cases of Anthropic, OpenAI. I'm not sure if they were expecting that visibility that they quickly obtained, and then when you get there, you suddenly have to behave like a mature company and do what the others are doing too. So that's one aspect. But I would use a different angle. If everybody right now, and I actually have a roundtable later today around lunchtime discussing the problem of creativity in large language models. If everybody is using the same scraped data from the internet, the same public sources, whether they are, and I always say public doesn't mean free, but okay, if everybody is doing the same, accessing the same sources over and over, what are you going to get is the behavior of the models all look the same, all sound the same, all spit out the same, which is actually what we're going to talk about. On top of that, we're evaluating and benchmarking every model according to it's a lot of them, but it's a handful of very prominent benchmarks to do that, which is always the same. So where do you see differentiator? What makes your model better than the other? Is it the price? Is it the speed of? I mean, sure, but behaviorally, accuracy, reasoning, it's the same. So where the difference lies is in the closed source license data that you're going to inject and fine-tune in certain aspects of the model. So that's what people are. If you look around, everything sounds the same, and it is interesting.
Is it expensive to procure some of the licensed data?
It is, absolutely, absolutely it is. But with the right feedback loop, understanding where the gaps are, what most people, companies with a lot of money, they throw data indiscriminately to the models. But everybody's starting to be more careful about where to invest the money, because you may throw another 100,000 hours of data and see 0.1% of improvement. So this is why the feedback loop of constant evaluation will show you that actually you should probably do a specific data collection, and have my model the best for financial transactions, or for math reasoning, or for whatever it is, for creative thinking or creative writing, but not probably do the large. Everybody right now is trying to tackle every problem, and because that's how benchmarks are measuring. They're measuring everything but just like us humans, we are not good at everything. We cannot expect that all large language models will be excellent at every skill set that we are supposed to produce.
Rodrigo, I know you work with a lot of governments across the world to develop sovereign models. Right. How does the AI kind of data pieces come together in developing those sovereign models?
Right. I mean, I think that's important to understand. You got people who are using AI for end user services. There are people that are using AI to provide services in an open market, right? And so I think what Daniela is talking is really important. You're trying to differentiate your services in the market, because you're trying to sell some service that isn't a race to the bottom, right? If you're offering the same thing, people are just looking at what's the cheapest for the same thing. And so that's one end. What SummaNova does is we're focused on enterprise and end user use cases. So governments, enterprises, people who are trying to take AI, transform the businesses, get significant value out of it, either operational costs, time to market, maybe a more competitive offering for their services. And so in those use cases, here's what I say. Most large companies, these Global 2000, you've accumulated data for decades, you don't know what it says. You don't, right? Take every bank in the world, you have all the data, you have no idea what it says, and worse, you're afraid to move it to discover what it is, because it took you decades to accumulate all of that data. And so what we've been doing, some of us say, look, leave the data where it is. I'll bring the AI to you. We'll bring hardware, software models all to you. We'll actually read that, train a model that you can then interrogate and chat to it privately, securely, the way you chat to ChatGPT, right? We can read every contract that you have, every policy that you have, every regulatory report that came in, do all of those types of things. But ultimately, our view of it is the data is the essence of differentiation. I agree with Danielle on that. It's about your data, and most companies have a lot of it. They don't know how to leverage it. So if you go into companies, your data is grossly under-leveraged, and you can actually use the technology today to actually bring it into a much higher utility vehicle in these AI models that allow you then transform that into value, right? Data becomes a model, the model then drives services, operational efficiency, and other things that you might want to do. And so ultimately, that's what we're trying to encourage people to think about. Try to leverage that data securely, privately, but deploy it in a way that you can control, you can regulate, you can test, make sure they're doing the right set of things. And the best way to do it is start with within your own firewalls, within your own ecosystem, so you can control where the data goes.
That's super interesting. And zooming out for a second, I think we can't talk about AI ethics without touching the grand theme about AGI, and when we get there, an implication for us. 2 years ago, one of the most prominent voices in AI, along with other researchers, had a public letter asking for pausing AI development with all the uncertainties that we have, like we are not sure what the models will be capable of. 2 years later, now we know the pause did not happen. We're still making progress. So I'm curious if you guys think if there is a certain level of pause or reckoning that we need to do to make more people think about the ethical implications of AI systems today.
I think we're already here, because the definition of AGI is on par with humans. Now, like we humans are not on par with, each individual has a set of skills, and we're good at different, and we rank differently in skills. Is there one AI system that beats us in everything? I think some people think that's what it means, but it really isn't. Is AI already beating us or being on par to our skills? If you look at the way large language models already perform, at the speed that they perform, for all the reasoning and creating content and summarization, so AGI is here. If anything, I've been very clear about that.
Well, I think there are two threads. I think there's the large language model. I think AGI or not, you can define whatever that is. I do think that the world's going to want to see more and more accurate models, right? Here's all I say: be careful with distilled models. Take a large model, make it small so it's efficient, right? To take a GPT-4 type of model and make it understand agriculture. Well, how do I remember 5 years from now not to ask questions that are outside of agriculture, right? And so, so be careful of models that are brittle, right? And so my view is you're going to have a thread of models that are very large, so they're robust. They're the general purpose models. And then there'll be a bunch of agents that are much more task specific, that do certain things really, really well, that you can build workflows. My belief is the agentic will get to production faster than the broader models just because it's easier to test. It's easier to verify. It's easier for all of us to be comfortable with because I can go and look at this agent. It's supposed to summarize. I put a bunch of interns over a summer, make sure to test it and understand. I can regulate it. I can go to production with that. I can do 10 different agents, and I can go to production with that. So I think these agentic systems are going to get to production faster just because we're going to be, as a society, more comfortable with it. I think the larger models, I think you're going to want. But I think over time, I think there are going to be more questions about, well, how did I arrive at that conclusion? And can I actually test it, verify, certify it in a way that I feel comfortable with it for my business? But I think the belief is you're going to see these models continue to get bigger because people want accuracy and people want breadth.
Yeah, and it's important to keep ethical considerations and impact on society along the way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's Rodrigo and Daniela. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.